This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream. On Friday morning at 9:30 in the morning, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng, stood up in the House of Commons to lay out the government's growth plan. In this so-called fiscal event, the Chancellor confidently announced that the government would be cutting taxes across the board, to be paid for with borrowing. This didn't go down so well with the markets, and within half an hour, the pound had started to crash against the dollar. On Monday, this trend continued, with the pound sinking to a 40-year low of $1.03, and British government bonds faring similarly miserably. So in this video, we're going to try and explain why the pound is falling against the dollar, why this is pretty bad news, and what might happen next. So let's start by looking at the data. The pound has been falling against the dollar for some time now. Technically, it's been falling pretty steadily since the aftermath of World War II, when £1 could buy you roughly $4. However, this decline has been remarkably steep in the past year or so. Having hovered at around $1.30 since Brexit, in the past 12 months the pound has fallen from $1.37 in October 2021 to near parity today. So why is this? Well, there are broadly two reasons the pound could drop against the dollar. The dollar has become stronger, or the pound has become weaker. Now, some of this drop is down to the strength of the dollar. Demand for the dollar has grown for essentially two reasons. First, the American economy has performed better than most post-COVID, and second, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. What this means is that the dollar is sort of the world's default currency. Financial institutions hold it in large quantities, and a plurality of global transactions, including the vast majority of oil and gas sales, are denominated in dollars. This means that, in times of uncertainty like today, investors revert to the dollar because, well, there's always demand for dollars and it can buy lots of stuff. You can see this if you compare the dollar against other global currencies. Across the board, basically every other currency has seen a depreciation against the dollar in the past 12 months. However, some of the decline, and especially the very steep decline over the last couple of days, has been more to do with the perceived weakness of the pound than anything to do with America. As we mentioned at the top, in the last few days, the pound has fallen from $1.14 to a low of about $1.04. And this is almost entirely to do with the government's recent mini-budget, presented to the Commons on Friday. In the mini-budget, which ended up being, well, a pretty big budget to be honest, the government announced £45 billion worth of tax cuts, including cuts to the top rate of income tax, corporation tax and stamp duty. On top of the £30 billion or so that's expected to be spent on the government's energy price cap scheme, this means that the UK's annual borrowing will more than double in the future, according to the IFS. Now, there's a whole load of complicated economics behind why investors reacted by selling pounds after this announcement, but the basic idea is that they weren't convinced by Truss's argument that tax cuts would pay for themselves in the medium term by stimulating growth. Instead, the markets apparently think that the UK won't grow quickly enough to pay off the consequent increase in the deficit. So they started dumping both pound and UK government bonds. This is why bond yields, which essentially measure the cost of borrowing for the UK government, yesterday jumped to their highest level in over a decade. The yield on a 10-year UK government bond, which was below 1% as recently as last year, has now jumped to over 4%, in the steepest increase since records began. This means borrowing just got significantly more expensive, which is pretty terrible news for a government that wants to embark on a borrowing spree. Confidence probably wasn't helped by the fact that the government also refused to publish an economic forecast alongside the announcement, even though the Office for Budget Responsibility had one ready. Anyway, on to the second part of this video. Are there any advantages to having a weak pound? Well, in theory, yes. A weak pound makes imports more expensive, but also makes UK exports more competitive, which could, in theory, be good news for British manufacturing. However, the main economic issue at the moment is energy prices, and a weak pound is pretty bad news in this respect because it'll make energy imports, which are usually priced in dollars, significantly more expensive. So on to the third and final part of this video. What happens next? Well, the Bank of England will be worried about both the collapsing pound and the inflationary impact of the tax cuts. Essentially, tax cuts fuel inflation because they mean more money in people's pockets, so more demand, more inflation. Anyway, the remedy for these issues for the bank is more interest rate hikes, which both stem inflation and increase the attractiveness of the pound, at least in theory. The downside here is that interest rate hikes, especially sharp ones, slow the economy down. Given that the UK economy is already slowing down, further rate hikes could well induce a recession. The tiny silver lining here is that, because most of the UK's debt is denominated in pounds, there's little chance of a default or a full-on currency crisis. As a last resort, the Bank of England could essentially print more money to pay off the debt, which would be bad news but would at least avoid a default. Anyway, you get the idea. Unsurprisingly, a collapsing currency and spiralling borrowing costs are bad news for the UK economy. As a last thing, this is all pretty terrible news for Prime Minister Liz Truss. Polling by YouGov, done immediately after the budget, found that the public overwhelmingly believed it would benefit wealthy people more than poor people, which is, well, pretty unsurprising given that it involved lowering the top rate of tax and scrapping the ban on bankers' bonuses. The most recent polling, published by Savanta Comres on Sunday, found that Labour enjoyed a 12-point lead over the Tories. It's also worth noting that the fieldwork for that poll would have been done before the pound began its collapse, so the numbers are probably even worse for the Tories today. There's even been rumours that Tory MPs have started sending in letters of no confidence to the 1922 committee, so it's possible that Liz Truss might end up being the shortest-lived Prime Minister in modern British history. The pound's crash is pretty bleak for anyone in the UK, especially Liz Truss. So if you want a little cheering up, then we have a bunch of more fun videos too.
Like our team attempting the British citizenship test, our blooper reel,
ethnic Hungarians. Is that Transylvania? Is that a real place? Is that who the f*** knew Transylvania was a real place? Am I an idiot? I thought it was made up.
our office tour, and our interview with TV expert Scott Bryan about why Piers Morgan and Talk TV are failing. Now, all of these videos are exclusive to the streaming service that we made with our creator friends, Nebula. Now, don't worry, I know that times are really tough at the moment, and that's why it's good news that Nebula is only about $1 a month if you sign up using the Nebula Curiosity Stream bundle. Here's how it works. We reached out to the good chaps at Curiosity Stream and said, hey, you have a superb streaming service full of some of the most high-quality documentaries available online. They emailed back saying, you mean highest quality, but sure. Now, I don't always appreciate pedantry like this, but they're right, we should have said highest, and they put forward an offer that we couldn't refuse. They said that anyone who signed up to their streaming service using this link, it's in the description, don't worry, will get access to Nebula absolutely free. Now, I like free things, so we said yes. So if you click the link below, you'll pay less than $15 a year for Curiosity Stream and all of the extra TLDR stuff on Nebula. That's just over $1 a month. So get yourself exclusive TLDR videos that will never come to YouTube. All of our videos ad-free, and some of our videos earlier than they come to YouTube by signing up now. For legal reasons, this exchange is entirely fictionalized, and honestly, I don't know how the deal was done. I'm not a legal kind of guy, so I wasn't in the room when it happened anyway. Also, just because I made this up doesn't mean that the rest of the stuff in this video wasn't true. Everything else I say is always 100% accurate, okay? Regardless, you should sign up.